Abigail? Wanting what, Abigail? You found me wanting? In one or two of your letters, you remind me to think of you as I ought. Be assured there is not an hour in the day when I do not think of you as I ought. That is, with every sentiment of tenderness, esteem, and of admiration. Your letters give me more entertainment. There is more good thoughts, fine strokes, and mother wit in them than I hear in the whole week. Abigail! But here, alone by my fireside, nobody to speak to, poring upon my future prospects. This is ugly. If God should please to restore me once more to your fireside, I would never again leave it without your ladyship's company.
Beware of rash promises, Mr. Adams. You found that one impossible to keep the first time.
I know it well, and it was a source of great regret to me, Abigail.
Who can give me back time? Who can compensate to me all those years I cannot recall? How dearly I have paid for a titled husband. Should I wish you less wise, so that I might enjoy more happiness? I cannot find that in my heart.
But I need not have been so obnoxious.
No, you need not. But it were ever your honesty and unwillingness to dissemble that made you so.
The falling out of lovers.
Is the renewal of love.
Grandison.
Grandison. The only extraordinary code of laws I meant to advance, John, was one of equality. It is my firm belief that liberty cannot be preserved without general knowledge and unfettered participation among the people. All the people, we the people.
The sentiments you express about our duties to our country are such as become the best of women and the best of men. We are as one in this. But how could you bear with such an obtuse fellow as myself?
That were the result of more promises, or have you forgot our wedding vows? In plenty and in want?
In joy and in sorrow.
In sickness and in health.
So long as we both...
And in plenty and in want is not obliged to mean this world's goods. I held that promise included the plenty of responsibilities laid on my shoulders while my spouse was away, the plenty of both discussion and argument with him, as well as the want of his company, and, yea, at times, the want of his understanding.
I am the most fortunate of men, that you were eager to sustain our union through such trials, most especially the argumentative spouse, who has been the cheering consolation of my heart in my most solitary, gloomy, and disconsolate hours. We were ever able to pull as one against the load of ill fortune and never falter, because we did so as true partners.
Oh, and who would have thought it? The one thing the responsibility of the farm has taught me is that an ill-matched team pulls unevenly in the traces. A country parson's daughter, never having even attended dame school, were not the ideal mate to hitch together with a Harvard graduate.
They called me a tough fielder, a scrubby little horse working hard for but meager feeding.
And I but a sickly, undersized filly, not thought able to bear the load of much schooling.
But she grew into a fine representation of her bloodline, with such stamina, such sagacity, and such natural wit as to make her partner in the tracers pant to keep pace. Indeed, my dear, without your clear judgment, your skill in discerning truth from social noise, and your balanced views on the most heated of issues to keep me moving down the best track, I would often have become mired and broken down along the road political.
So you do not regret to writing to a woman about politics?
I cry pardon, my dear. Never did I regret writing of such to you. You engendered much respect among the sages of the day, and it was well known that the good lady, my wife, was as complete a politician as anybody in the old French court. Your reputation as politician, parent, farmer, or anything else you undertook, I dare answer for. Indeed, General Warren once wrote me that my farm never looked better than without me. And that Mrs. Adams was like to outshine all the farmers. Your partner's character as statesman, much more problematical. And without your wise counsel, most likely improvident.
Improvident? You were no spendthrift.
I know very well that without your singular capacity, energy, and good judgment, I may well have suffered financial ruin, as have so many of my contemporaries in public office.
The approbation you gave me in the management of our private affairs was always very grateful. It sufficiently compensated all my anxieties and endeavors to discharge the plenty of responsibilities in consequence of my dearest friend's absence. If only they'd been discharged equal to my wishes, I should merit the praises you bestow.
Oh, Abigail, you were ever equal to all roles and any responsibility. Parent, farmer, political advisor, manager of my business, my confidant, my counselor, my eyes of the revolution. While we in Congress sat safe in Philadelphia, you kept bravely on the very skirts of war. It was your eyes saw the smoke of the guns, the explosions of the artillery, wounded soldiers limping by.
Everything of that kind you learned by a more accurate hand than mine. Things remain here in much the same situation as they were when you went away. There's been no descent upon the seacoast, yet nobody is admitted into Boston town yet.
There is in this Continental Congress a collection of the greatest men upon the continent in point of abilities, virtues, and fortunes. The magnanimity and public spirit which I see here makes me blush for the sordid venal herd which I have seen in my own province.
I view the town now with much the same sensations as I should the body of a departed friend, only put off its present glory for to rise finally to a more happy state. I will not despair, but will believe that our cause being right, we shall finally prevail. The maxim here is, in time of peace, prepare for war. If this may be called a time of peace.
The business of the Congress is tedious beyond expression. Every man in this assembly is an orator, a critic, a statesman, and therefore every man upon every question must show his oratory, his criticism, and his political abilities. The consequence of this is that business is drawn and spun out to an immeasurable length. I believe that if it were moved and seconded that we should come to a resolution that 3 and 2 make 5, we should be entertained with logic and rhetoric, law, history, politics, and mathematics for 2 whole days. And then we should pass the resolution unanimously in the affirmative.
The British soldiers are making all sorts of warlike preparations, such as mounting cannon upon Beacon Hill, digging entrenchments upon the neck, placing cannon there, encamping a regiment, throwing up breastworks, etc. The people are much alarmed.
The Congress advises that our people must be peaceable. Let them drill every day in the week if they will, the more the better. Let them furnish furnish themselves with artillery, arms, and ammunition. Let them follow the maxim which you say they have adopted, but let them avoid war if possible. If possible, I say.
Great commotions have arisen in the consequence of the discovery of a Tory plot to seize the province's stock of gunpowder. About 8 o'clock, there marched by about 200 men and marched down to the powder house from whence they took the powder and carried it into the next parish and there secreted it. I opened the window upon their return. They passed by without a noise, not a word among them, until coming against this house, some of them perceiving me, asked me if I wanted any powder. I replied, not since it's in so good hands. The reason they gave for taking it was that we have so many Tories here, they dare not trust us with it.
Reconciliation if practicable, and peace if attainable, you very well know, would be as agreeable to my inclinations and as advantageous to my interests as to any man's. But I see no prospect, no probability, no possibility.
The Tories have taken a list of all those who they suppose were concerned in watching the tea, as well as every other person whom they call obnoxious. It is rumored that they are listing the delegates and marking those who will be offered a chance of pardon. J. Adams is not one.
I am often concerned for you and our dear babes. In the case of real danger, fly to the woods with our children.
Have you an account of the alarm we had last Sunday morning? I arose about 6 o'clock. The drums had been some time beating. 3 alarm guns had fired, and Weymouth Bell was ringing. I found the whole town in confusion. 3 ships had set sail from Boston Harbor and dropped anchor below Great Hill. It was difficult to tell their design, but some supposed they were coming to Weymouth. People, women, children flocking down this way. My father's family flying. My aunt had her bed thrown into a cart into which she got herself and ordered the boy to drive her off to Bridgewater. The report was that some 300 had landed and were upon their march. The alarm flew like lightning, and men from all parts came flocking down, till 2,000 were collected.
Our debates and deliberations are tedious, our determinations very slow, I hope sure.
But it seems the British expedition was for Grape Island and Mr. Levitt's hay. The sight of so many persons and the firing upon them prevented them getting any more than 3 ton, though they carted a great deal more down to the water. We expect to be in continual alarm soon, at least until something decisive takes place. We wait with longing expectation in hopes to hear the best accounts from you with regard to union and harmony.
Congress has appointed a committee to collect an account of the hostilities committed by the troops and the ships, with proper evidence of the number and value of the houses and other buildings destroyed or damaged, the crops, cattle, sheep, hogs, etc. taken.
Does every member feel for us? And can they realize what we suffer and with what patience and fortitude we endure the conflict?
Congress will support us, but in their own way.
Oh, I think I am very brave upon the whole, but if danger comes near my dwelling, I suppose I shall shudder.
It gives me more pleasure than I can express to learn that you sustain with such fortitude the shocks and terrors of the times. The military spirit which runs through the continent is truly amazing. This city turns out 2,000 men every day. Washington appears at Congress with his uniform and by his great experience and abilities in military matters is of much service to us. Oh, that I was a soldier. I will be. I am reading military books. Everybody must and will and shall be a soldier.
It has been said tomorrow and tomorrow for this month past. But when the dreadful tomorrow will be, I know not. Hark! The house this instant shakes with the roar of cannon. I went to bed after 12, but got no rest. The cannon continued firing, and my heart beat pace with them all night long. But what tomorrow will bring forth, only knows. I've just returned from Penn's Hill, from whence I could see every every shell which was thrown. It is now an incessant roar. Oh, the fatal thoughts which are connected with the sound. How many of our dear countrymen must fall?
We have received a confused account from Boston of a dreadful catastrophe.
The day, perhaps the decisive day is come, upon which the fate of America depends. I have just learned that our dear friend, Dr. Warren, is no more, but fell gloriously fighting for his country, saying better to die honorably on the field than to ignominiously hang upon the gallows. Great is our loss. The battle began upon our entrenchments upon Bunker's Hill about 3 o'clock Saturday morning. It has not ceased yet, and 'tis now 3 o'clock Sabbath afternoon. How many have fallen? We know not. The constant roar of the cannon is so distressing we cannot eat, sleep, or drink. Almighty God, cover the heads of our countrymen and be a shield to our dearest friends.
The town of Boston, for aught I can see, must suffer martyrdom. And our principal consolation is that it dies in a noble cause. When the horrid news was brought here of the bombardment, we saw proofs both of the sympathy and resolution of the continent. War, war, war was the cry, and it was pronounced in a tone that would have done honor to the oratory of a Roman. You should have heard the thunder of an American Congress.
But in the midst of our sorrow, we have abundant cause for happiness, that so few of our brethren are numbered among the slain, whilst our enemies were cut down like the grass before the scythe. But one officer of all the Welsh Fusiliers remains to tell his story. Many poor wretches die for want of proper assistance and care of their wounds. Every report agrees in 14 and 1,500 wounded and slain upon their side. Nor can I learn that they dissemble the numbers themselves. But we had some heroes that day, who fought with amazing intrepidity and courage. Our men had but 100 foot entrenched. The number engaged did not exceed 800, and they had not half ammunition enough, the reinforcements unable to get to them. The tide was up and high, so the British floating batteries came upon each side of the causeway, keeping up a continual fire. Added to that, the fire from Fort Hill and the town in flames all around them, the heat from the flames so intense as to scarcely be borne, and the day, the hottest we have had this season, and the wind blowing the smoke in their faces. Only figure to yourself all of these circumstances, and then consider, we do not count 60 men lost. My heart overflows at the recollection.
The account you give me of the numbers slain on the side of our enemies is affecting to humanity. Although it is glorious proof of the bravery of our worthy countrymen, considering all the disadvantages under which they fought, they really exhibited prodigies of valor.
Our house has been upon this alarm in the same scene of confusion as it was upon the first. Soldiers coming in for lodging, for supper, for drink. I've melted down the household pewter for musket balls. Sometimes refugees from Boston, tired and fatigued, come seeking an asylum for a day, a night, a week. You can hardly imagine how we live.
It seems to be the intention of heaven that we should be taught the full value of our liberty by the dearness of the purchase.
But I would not have you be distressed about me. Danger, they say, makes people valiant. Hitherto I have been distressed, but not sore dismayed. I have felt for my country and her sons. I have bled with them and for them.
A consolation must be this, my dear, that cities may be rebuilt, and a people reduced to poverty may acquire fresh property. But a constitution of government, once changed from freedom, cannot be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. And if the people once surrender their share in the legislature and their right of defending upon the limitations of government, they can never regain it.
great anxiety I feel for my country, for you and our family, appears on all sides. What course you can or will take is all wrapped in the bosom of futurity.
Yesterday, the greatest question was decided which ever was debated in America. And greater perhaps never was nor will be decided among men. A resolution was passed without one dissenting colony, that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states.
Last Sunday after service, the Declaration of Independence was read from the pulpit by order of council. The Reverend concluded by lifting his eyes and hands to heaven, saying, "God bless the United States of America, and let all the people say,
Amen." The day ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of the continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure it will cost us to maintain this declaration and to support and defend these states.
Many the anxious hours I have spent, and far from thinking the scene finished, it looked as though the curtain was but just drawn and only the first scene of the infernal plot disclosed. And whether the end will be tragical, heaven alone knows. Uncertainty and expectation leave the mind great scope. Did ever any kingdom or state regain their freedom when once it was invaded without much bloodshed? I cannot think of it without horror. You cannot be, I know, nor do I wish to see you an inactive spectator. But if the sword be drawn, I bid adieu to all domestic felicity.
Be not under any concern for me. There is very little danger from anything at the Congress. There is such a spirit through the colonies, and the members of Congress are such characters that no danger can happen to us that will not involve the whole continent in universal desolation. And in that case, who would wish to live?
But I see how necessary you are to the welfare and protection of a country that I love, and a people who will one day do justice to your memory.
There will be few tears of gratitude, or the smiles of admiration, or the sighs of pity for us. The true story of the American Revolution will never get into the history books, Abigail. A gloss of coherence and inevitability will be laid for the much messier realities. An historically correct account would emphasize the utter confusion of all the actors in the drama, including myself, making it up as we went along.
But history will record there was no man in America more respected.
Nor as little liked. I, poor creature, worn out from scribbling for my bread and my liberty, must leave others to wear the laurels which I have sown.
Pooh. The people gave you a hero's welcome upon our final return from Europe. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their lives are bound in shallows and in misery. Shakespeare! You ever rode the crest of that flood, John? When the ministers of France wouldn't listen, you left for Amsterdam on your own initiative, and without one word of the language, sustained loans sufficient to sustain the revolution. It was you who negotiated an honorable peace with England, and you had the honor to sign that treaty alongside the great Franklin.
Some fellow named West once began a portrait to commemorate that event, but he never thought it worth finishing.
And to whom did Massachusetts turn when it was time to write her own state constitution? 1J. Adams.
Congress saw no need to turn to 1J. Adams to draft the nation's constitution.
They had no need to, for they had Mr. Adams' model to consult and copy, which they did in almost every aspect. And you had much respect in the Continental Motions for a standing army commanded by Washington?
My motions, my harangues. 'Tis my belief they finally agreed, but to spare their ears.
In the estimation of your countrymen, you were second only to Washington when it came time to choose a president.
And I would have been second under no man but Washington. There can be no office more maddening, exasperating, infuriating, irritating, irksome, and wearisome as that of vice president. An empty, annoying, taxing title without authority and with little influence. Oh yes, those holding that title in the future will have little cause to love me. I spoke so frequently and with such length in the Senate that they, as a body, rewrote the rules of procedure so that the vice president, although presiding, may not speak. His sole remaining function to cast a vote in the case of a tie. A vain post which answered no other end than to make me unpopular.
Popular enough to be elected second president of the United States over Jefferson? And it were fortunate for the nation that you were. For without J. Adams, America would have no navy and had been lost in the War of 1812. You held off warmongers, panting to repay years of French insults, long enough to build our ships and negotiate an honorable treaty.
Long enough to destroy any hope of a second term.
You gave up personal gain and prestige for what you knew to be right and best for the country. You were ever so, John. What, years ago, you could have been Crown Justice of Massachusetts, but you declined in order to support your friends in securing rights for all of the colony.
If you recall, I took the offer of that office by defending lobsterbacks in what history chooses to call the Boston Massacre.
So now, after all these years, you are filled with regret and would have chosen otherwise.
I would not. Whatever their crimes, they deserved a trial. And a fair trial cannot be had without a lawyer for the defense. Yet all the Boston lawyers, even the Tories, refused them counsel. Counsel is the last thing a free man should be deprived of in a free country. And this was but a handful of soldiers defending themselves against a motley rabble of saucy boys, Irish teats, and outlandish jack tars, gentlemen of the jury. This was a mob, no less. Mobs are sources of all sorts of evils, vices, and crimes. I wish merely to discuss the question, without all painting, pathos, flourish, or rhetoric of any kind. And the question is, were these men guilty of cold-blooded murder, or were they merely driven to defend themselves as any man has a right to do? Facts are stubborn things, gentlemen. And whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, and the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of fact and evidence. These 8 soldiers were but doing their duty, accompanied and dispatched by their captain. The mob before them numbered some 300 or 400 men, who certainly had the right of assembly, but these many witnesses attest that they were in pursuit of no lawful business, rather attacking the soldiers with insults, bricks, and cudgels. Indeed, taunted them to fire so loudly that alarm bells rang to control the conflagration. Captain Preston would not have given the order to fire, as he stood between the soldiers and the mob. Patrick Carr, one of the victims not instantly killed, gave witness from his deathbed that as a native of Ireland, he had frequently seen mobs and soldiers called upon to quell them. That he had seen the soldiers often fire on the people in Ireland, but he had never seen them bear half so much before they fired in his life.
And as the evidence was presented, the verdict of the jury was exactly right.
My Portia, I was relieved when the jury was as clear-headed and found them innocent. A judgment of death upon those soldiers would have been as foul a stain upon this country as the execution of the Salem witches.
And it was you took the case when none else would.
An initial 10 guineas and a subsequent payment of 8 was all the pecuniary reward I ever had for the most exhausting and fatiguing cause I ever tried. It was, however, one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and one of the greatest pieces of service I ever rendered my country.
And you took the case but a month past the death of our little Susanna, the which you could not bear to speak of for most of a year.
At least I was with you for our mutual support during that awful time. Worse for you when I was in Philadelphia with the Congress and you came to bed with our youngest, all alone.
Oh. Oh. I've been most unwell this week past, with some complaints that are new to me, though I hope not dangerous. I was taken last night with a shaking fit, and very apprehensive that a life was lost. I have no reason today to think so. Heaven only knows. Oh, I can think of no injury to myself or any other thing which could occasion what I fear.
Oh, that I could have taken from my dearest a share of her distress, or relieved her of the whole.
About an hour ago, I received a letter beginning in this manner. My dearest friend, I have no doubt of the purest affection or sincerest regard of my absent friend, yet an expression of that sort will soothe my heart to rest amidst 1,000 anxieties. It was a great consolation to me. It was a cordial to my heart. Oh, 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 oh. 'Tis now 48 hours since I can say I really enjoyed any ease. Slow, lingering, and troublesome is the present situation. Though the doctor encourages me to hope that my apprehensions are groundless respecting what I wrote you yesterday. My spirits are better. I only pray heaven that it will be soon, or it seems I shall be worn out. Oh, I must put down my pen this moment and bear what I cannot fly from.
My mind is again anxious, and my heart is in pain for my dearest friend. 3 times have I felt the most distressing sympathy with my partner without being able to offer her any kind of solace or assistance. When the family was sick of the dysentery and so many of our friends died of it. When you all had the smallpox.
Oh! Now that I have endured it, I reassume my pen. I got more rest last night than I expected, but am, however, more ill this morning. This day, 10 years ago, Master John Quincy came into the world. May I have reason again to recollect it with peculiar gratitude.
And now I feel as anxious as ever. Before this shall reach you, I hope you will be happy in the embraces of a daughter, as fair and good and wise and virtuous as the mother. Or, if it is a son, I hope it will still resemble the mother in person, mind, and heart.
Join with me, my dearest friend, in gratitude to heaven that the life I know you value has been spared and carried through distress and danger. But the dear infant, a sweet daughter, is numbered with its ancestors. My apprehensions were well-founded. I was as perfectly sensible of its decease as I ever was of its existence. She appeared to be a very fine babe, and having never opened her eyes in this world, it looked as though they were only closed for sleeping. The circumstance which put an end to the babe's existence were evident. Suffice it to say, it was not owing to any injury to myself, nor could any care of mine have prevented it. Oh.
Is it not unaccountable that one should feel so strong an affection for an infant that one has never seen, nor will see? But I must confess to you the loss of this sweet little girl has most affected me. Devoutly do I return thanks to God, whose kind providence has preserved to me a life which is dearer to me than all other blessings in this world.
I never thought to live whilst 4 of the children I carried neath my heart were laid in their final rest. Oh, this sweet babe ne'er even drew breath, and my darling Susanna was barely lisping Mama and Papa.
My dear, your sons, John Quincy and Thomas.
And Charlie, my bonny boy, taken while so young, taken from his own children, too young to remember their father. And my firstborn, my beautiful Nabby, ravaged and wasted by a slow-eating cancer. Such suffering until the very end.
In joy and in sorrow, my dear. In joy and in sorrow.
In sickness and in health. By times it seems though heaven has apportioned us sorrow and sickness until I am ready to faint under such severe and heavy strokes. Combined as they were with separations from thee, war,
It
want,
is not uncommon for a train of calamities to come together. Fire, sword, pestilence, famine, all keep company and visit us in a flock. I am sure that you are sensible that the consolations of religion are the only sure comforters.
You abandoned the ministry for the law, John. Spare me quotations from the Puritan divines now. Sickness has ravaged our family. Your own brother Elihu was cut off in the pride of life and bloom of manhood by the dysentery, along with my own dear mother. After nursing family and neighbors, after sustaining 16 days of the disease, nature fainted and she fell off this mortal coil. Oh, have pity upon me. Have pity upon me, oh my beloved, for the hand of God presseth me sore.
It is the constitution under which we are born, that if we live long enough ourselves, we must bury our parents, our elder relations, and many of those who are younger. There is no help, for it is the common tie of humanity that we must lose our friends.
And there is a tie more binding than humanity and stronger than friendship, which makes us anxious for the welfare and happiness of those to whom it binds us.
My dearest friend, I could never bear to see you unhappy. It has often been my prayer, and I know it has often been yours in many times, places, and circumstances. Oh God, if you could but annihilate space and time and make two lovers happy.
How?
I believe so.
John, you surprise me.
Well, old minds are like old horses, my dear. You must exercise them if you wish to keep them in working order.
Including the sickly, undersized filly.
I was thinking more of the tough fielder. You and I had reason, my dear, if ever mortals had, to look forward beyond the transitory scene, to be prepared to receive whatever is preparing for us. With sickness in the air, recall how we braved inoculation to keep the family safe from the smallpox, and inoculation is no light matter. A long and total abstinence of anything in nature that has any taste, 2 heavy vomits, 1 heavy cathartic, 4 and 20 mercurial and antimonial pills, and 3 weeks close confinement. But who would not cheerfully submit to them, rather than pass his whole life in continual fears, in subjection, under bondage? My only regret was we could not endure the process altogether.
Well, we could not have endured it altogether, because when you endured it, we too were as yet courting, and the children not yet thought of. Oh, Mother was so careful of infection. insisting that your letters be smoked before I should touch them. Did you ever visit a bird's nest? How the poor creature would fly round about, fearful to come nigh, and yet not know how to leave the place. Just so, they say, I hovered about whilst they smoked your letters to me. I sent you some tobacco to smoke your letters over, though I don't imagine you used it all that way.
Well, not all. Here is something that may amuse you. After having been 10 or 11 days inoculated, I lay lolling on my bed. Likewise, half a dozen other young fellows, all as lazy as myself, all waiting and wishing for symptoms and eruptions. All of a sudden, there appeared at the chamber door the Reverend Doctor, with his rosy face, his many-curled wig, and his pontifical air and gait. I have been thinking, says he, of adopting the benediction of the Romish clergy, and upon entering the apartments of the sick, to cry, Pax tecum, or rather in the foreign pronunciation, Pox tecum. One would have thought that Sir Isaac Newton's discovery of the system of gravitation did not require a deeper reach of thought than this frivolous pun. Did you ever see two persons, both dosed with syrup of ipecac in one room together? I assure you they make merry diversion. We took turns to be sick and to laugh. When my companion was sick, I laughed at him, and when I was sick, he laughed at me. Once, however, and only once, we were both sick together, and then all laughter and good humor deserted the room.
Dear, yes, John. I am familiar with just such a scene, for besides myself, I had 4 children to bring through the process.
Well, as I have said before, my dear, you are a heroine. It is an important event in a man's life to go through that distemper. It is a very great thing for a whole family to get well over it.
Well, I knew your mind so perfectly upon the subject, I thought nothing but our complete recovery would give you equal satisfaction.
It was, to my great satisfaction, my partner in all the joy and sorrow, prosperity and adversity, that you took part with me in that struggle, and in all the labors, trials, and exertions of my life.
Then let her, who tenderly cared for you in both sickness and in health, entreat you to be careful of that health, upon which life depends. Remember, temperance, exercise, and peace of mind.
Franklin, his almanac.
Adams, his diary.
Yes, I see I also advised myself to avoid politics, political clubs, and town meetings. And you know how well I followed that advice, eh?
Promise me you will earnestly look forward to that country where there is neither war nor rumors of war, with a firm belief in the mercy of its king, that we shall both rejoice there together.
Yes. Yes, I promise. But, Abigail, can you possibly know how dull, empty, and unprofitable life is without you?
You still have my letters. Keep your spirits up. And I make no doubt you will do well enough until we meet in a, to quote one J. Adams, wiser, fairer, better world.
I am until then, and forever after will be your Lysander, admirer, friend, and lover.
I wish you well on the remainder of your journey. I am ever your Portia, your Diana.
My dearest friend.
Yours, most affectionately.
Abigail.